All came at 6:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been awake since 5, sitting at my kitchen table in my scrubs, eating a granola bar over the sink, and mentally running through which patients I needed to check on first when my shift started at 7. I was a floor nurse at St. Augustine's, had been for 6 years. I was used to early mornings. I was used to putting everyone else first. That part, at least, had always come naturally to me. My phone buzzed, and my mother's name lit up the screen. "Honey," she said, before I could even say hello. "We need to talk about your brother's situation." My brother, 26 years old, college dropout, living in my parents' spare room for the past 3 years, had apparently gotten into some trouble with his car. The transmission had gone. He needed $2,200 to fix it, or he'd lose his job at the warehouse. My mother explained this the way she always explained things that involved money, quickly, without a pause for breath, as if speed might stop me from thinking too clearly. "Mom," I said, "I have to be at work in 10 minutes. I know, but if he doesn't have the car, he can't get to work. And if he can't get to work, I'll call you tonight." She did not say goodbye. She just made a small sound, the one that meant I was being difficult, and hung up. I stood there for a second with the phone in my hand, staring at my reflection in the dark window above the sink. 29 years old, $53,000 a year before taxes, $1,200 a month going to my parents' mortgage because my father's disability checks didn't cover it, plus whatever extra came up. Groceries when things were tight, co-pays when my mother had her knee procedure, my brother's last car repair bill 8 months ago, my grandmother's birthday dinner last November because you're the one who actually has money, sweetheart. I put the phone face down on the counter and went to work. I don't know exactly when it started. The giving. It's one of those things that builds so slowly you don't notice you're under it until you can't breathe. I think it started after I graduated nursing school and my dad had his accident, a fall at the construction site. 2 vertebrae, a surgery that left him walking but not working. I was 23. I had student loans and a 1-bedroom apartment and a starting salary that felt enormous compared to what I'd grown up with. Of course I helped, it was obvious. It was right, but helping has a way of becoming expected, and expected has a way of becoming obligated. And before I knew it, I was the family's financial floor, the thing everyone stood on without thinking about what it cost to hold them up. My brother never seemed to consider getting a roommate to save money. My mother never suggested he contribute to the household. My father, sweet, tired, in pain, had long since stopped keeping track of what was being asked of me. He just trusted that everyone was fine because nobody told him otherwise. And I never said no. Not once. Not really. I'd hesitate. I'd breathe out slowly. I'd say, "Let me check my account." But I always found the money. I always found the money. I always sent it. I told myself it was love. Mostly, I think, it was fear of the sound my mother made when she felt I was being difficult. The morning I collapsed, I'd been awake for 31 hours. I'd picked up a double shift because one of the other nurses had a family emergency, and because I could use the overtime, and because saying yes was still easier than saying no. I'd eaten half a protein bar at 2 in the morning and a cup of coffee at 5. At 7:15, during handoff, I stood up from the nurse's station and the room tilted hard to the left. I remember reaching for the counter. I remember it not being where I thought it was. After that, I don't remember anything until the ceiling of the emergency department. A colleague found me on the floor. They got me to the ER, ran the tests, and admitted me. Severe exhaustion, dangerously high blood pressure, the beginning stages of what the attending called a hypertensive crisis. I was 32 hours away from a possible stroke. She said this very calmly, the way doctors do, looking at me over her clipboard. I was so tired I couldn't feel afraid. My mother arrived at the hospital at 9:45. She sat with me for an hour. She held my hand, which surprised me. She looked genuinely scared, which surprised me more. For 1 hour, I let myself believe that this, me, lying in a hospital bed, connected to monitors, being told my body had been pushed past what a body should be pushed, was going to change something between us. Then her phone rang. She stepped out of the room to answer it. I heard her voice in the hallway, low and quick. When she came back in, her face had a different shape. Not scared anymore. Something else. "That was your brother," she said. "He's outside." He says he can't park for more than 30 minutes. The lot is expensive. Tell him to go home, I said. You don't both need to be here. She looked at her hands. Actually, honey, the thing is, we had something planned for this weekend before any of this happened. I waited. Your brother booked a cabin up in Vermont. Just the three of us, me, your dad, him and his girlfriend. It's been booked since January, non-refundable. She paused. The doctor said you're stable. I heard what she was saying. I heard every part of what she was saying. Mom, it's only 4 days. We'll have our phones on. And you have coworkers here. You're in the right place. Honestly, you'll probably be sleeping most of the time, Mom. She stopped. I'm in the hospital. I said, I know, sweetheart, I know. But the doctor said stable, and the cabin has already been, go, I said. I don't know why I said it. Some old reflex. Some muscle memory of smoothing things over so she wouldn't make that sound. She squeezed my hand. She said she loved me. She was gone by 10:30. For the next 4 days, nobody from my family came. My mother texted twice, one message the first night that said, hope you're resting, with a heart emoji, and one on day 3 with a photo of a lake at sunset. My brother didn't text at all. My father sent one message that just said, love you, kiddo, and I knew my mother had handed him the phone and told him what to write. My colleagues came. 2 of them brought flowers. My charge nurse sat with me for 40 minutes on her lunch break and held my hand and didn't say anything, just sat there. My friend from orientation 6 years ago drove 45 minutes after her shift to bring me soup from the place I like on Clement Street. Not one person in my family came. On the second day, the hospital social worker stopped by, routine, she said, for admissions involving a hypertensive crisis, especially in younger patients. She was matter-of-fact and kind. She asked about my stress levels, my sleep, my support system. I told her the truth, which I had not planned to do. I told her about the money and the shifts and the phone calls and my mother's hand squeeze at 10:30 in the morning. She listened. She didn't flinch. She said, you know you're allowed to have limits. 3 words I had heard before and never quite believed. On the 4th day, my mother came back. She breezed in carrying a paper coffee cup and a tote bag from a gift shop at the Vermont rest stop, a little jar of maple syrup, a printed tea towel with leaves on it. She set them on the bedside table and smiled the smile that meant she had decided everything was fine. You look so much better, she said. I need to talk to you about something, I said. She settled into the chair, still smiling. Of course, honey. I can't keep sending money. The smile stayed for a second, running on muscle memory. The $1,200 a month, I said. And the extras. I've been doing the math. In the last 4 years, it's been over $60,000. I had actually done the math the night before, in the fluorescent quiet of 3 in the morning, when I couldn't sleep. The number had sat in my chest like a stone. I need that money. I need it for my own life. And I need you and Dad to figure out a plan that doesn't involve me being the plan. The smile was gone now. After everything we've done for you, she said. Not a question. Just that sentence, delivered flat, like it was supposed to land somewhere, and it did. I know you love me, I said. I'm not saying you don't. I'm saying I collapsed. I am in a hospital bed right now because my body gave out, and you went to Vermont. Her jaw moved. That's not fair. You told me to go. I did, I said, because you were already halfway out the door, and because saying no to you has never once in my life felt like something I was allowed to do. She was quiet for a long time. Then she picked up the tote bag with the maple syrup and the tea towel, and she set it back on the table. Slowly, like she was deciding whether to take it with her. I think you need to rest, she said. She left. I was discharged 2 days later. A nurse I didn't know personally. A young guy named something with a T, I've already half forgotten, the way you forget details that don't matter, walked me through my discharge paperwork. Blood pressure medication, dietary adjustments, a referral to a cardiologist for a follow-up in 6 weeks, and at the bottom of the discharge packet, tucked behind the medication instructions, a printed visitor log. Routine, he said. The hospital kept them for insurance purposes. He handed it to me and moved on to the next patient. I almost didn't look at it. I looked at it. The log went back 6 days. Each entry had a timestamp, a visitor name, and a sign-in signature. My mother and brother, day 1, approximately 90 minutes, signed out at 10:27 a.m. My colleagues, scattered across days 1 through 4. My friend, day 2, evening, a few other coworkers. And then, at the bottom of each day, every single day, including the days my family was in Vermont, a name I did not recognize, Harlan Voss. Every night, 8:15 p.m. to 9 p.m., 45 minutes, like clockwork. 6 nights in a row, Harlan Voss. I had never in my life heard that name. I stared at the log for a long time, standing in the discharge bay with my plastic bag of belongings, trying to place the name against anyone I had ever known. A patient's family member? A former colleague? A neighbor? Nothing. The name produced nothing. I asked the nurse to check. He came back a few minutes later with the front desk attendant, a woman who'd clearly been there through 3 generations of paperwork and did not easily get flustered. She looked at the log, looked at me, and pulled up something on her computer. He signed in as a family friend, she said. Showed ID, didn't cause any issues. Security noted he was quiet, stayed in the chair, didn't request anything. They assumed you'd invited him. I didn't know he was there, I said. She looked at me with the specific expression of someone who has seen everything. Well, she said, he knew you were. I drove home with that name sitting in my chest the same way the number 60,000 had sat there 2 nights before. Harlan Voss, family friend, every night. 45 minutes, no more, no less. Never identified himself to staff. Never asked for anything. Just signed in, went to the ICU ward, and sat in the chair outside my room. Outside my room. Because I had been unconscious or sleeping for most of those nights, and the ICU rooms were private. He had sat outside and not even been able to see me. He had just been there. It took me 4 days to find him. I searched the name online first and found almost nothing. A LinkedIn profile for a retired civil engineer in Spokane, Washington, with a profile photo that was maybe 10 years old. Gray at the temples, broad jaw, a stillness about the face that I couldn't explain why I kept looking at. I almost closed the tab. I didn't close the tab. I sent a message through LinkedIn, which I have never done in my life for anything personal, and typed something short and factual. I was the patient at St. Wharton. Augustine's last week. I saw your name in the visitor log. I don't know how you know me. I'd like to. He replied within an hour. The message was long and had clearly been thought about for a long time. Maybe much longer than an hour. He wrote that he understood if I never wanted to speak to him again. He wrote that he had no desire to disrupt my life or make claims on anything. He wrote that he had known, for 31 years, that I existed, because I was his daughter. I sat at my kitchen table and read the message 3 times. He and my mother had been together briefly before she met my father. He had not known about the pregnancy. By the time he found out, through a mutual friend, years later, when I was already a toddler, my mother was married and wanted nothing disturbed. He had respected that. He had stayed away, because she asked him to, and because he believed, genuinely, that a stable 2-parent home was better for a child than the disruption of a stranger arriving with his hand out. But he had not stayed entirely away. He had come to my high school graduation, sat in the back, left before the reception. He had driven past the nursing school building the spring I graduated, just to see it. He had found my profile on the hospital staff page and read it more than once, he admitted, with a quiet embarrassment that came through even in a LinkedIn message. When he'd seen the local incident report, hospitals filed them with the city, it turned out, certain types of admissions. He had driven 11 hours. 11 hours. One way. He had sat in a chair outside my room for 6 nights, 45 minutes each time, so as not to attract attention, and then driven to a motel on the edge of town and come back the next evening. He hadn't told me he was there because he didn't think he had the right. I called him that evening. His voice was low and careful, and he said my name at the start of the call. Just my name, nothing else. In a way that made me have to set the phone down for a second and look at the ceiling. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about the civil engineering firm he'd built and sold in his 50s, which was where the LinkedIn profile came from. He told me about his own family, a son from a later marriage, now grown, who knew about me and had apparently said, "You should reach out," enough times that it had become a long-running conversation. He told me he had a dog named after a jazz musician and that he made his own bread every Sunday. and that he had a recurring argument with his neighbor about the property line that had been going on for 4 years with no sign of resolution. He told me small things, domestic things, as if he understood that I needed to know he was a real person before I could figure out what to do with any of the rest of it. I told him I was a nurse. He said he knew. I told him I had been supporting my family financially for 4 years and that my body had finally given out. He was quiet for a long time. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry no one was there." "You were there," I said, and I didn't mean it as a compliment. Not exactly, more like a fact I was still processing. But I heard him exhale on the other end of the line, and I understood that it meant something to him. I called my mother the next morning. I told her about Harlan Voss. I told her I knew. She was silent for so long that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "How did you?" she started. "The visitor log," I said. Another long silence. "I was trying to protect you," she said finally. "He was never part of our life. Your father, the man who raised you, he's your real father." "I know who raised me," I said. "I'm not saying he didn't. I'm saying you made a decision about my life that wasn't yours to make." She didn't have anything to say to that. "I've been thinking a lot lately about what we owe each other. I think I used to believe that love meant not having limits, that if you truly cared about someone, you gave them whatever they asked for without counting. I think that's what my mother taught me, in her way. She just applied it only in one direction. I stopped the automatic transfers the month I got out of the hospital. $1,200 a month, plus the extras. Done." My mother called 3 times in the first week. The first 2 calls I let go to voicemail. The third one I picked up and I said, calmly, without heat, that I wasn't able to continue sending money, and that I hoped they would find a workable solution, and that I loved them, and that I needed to go. She made the sound. I stayed steady. My brother texted to say that he thought I was being selfish. I did not respond. My father called 2 weeks later and said he didn't entirely understand what had happened, but that he hoped I was taking care of myself. It was the most he'd said to me in years that wasn't about money. I told him I was. I told him I loved him. I meant it. That one was complicated, and I am still figuring out where it lands. Harlan. I call him Harlan, not my dad. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Maybe someday. Drove out to see me in October. We had dinner at a restaurant I like, the kind of place that's a little too loud on a Saturday, but in a way that makes it easier to talk. He brought his son, who was easy to be around in the way of someone who's done a lot of their own quiet processing and arrived somewhere steady. At one point during dinner, while we were waiting for the check, Harlan's son leaned over and said he practiced what to order for like a week. He wanted to make sure he didn't pick something that would be hard to eat while talking. Harlan gave him a look. I laughed for the first time in what felt like a long time. I am not healed. That's not how this ends. I am on blood pressure medication, and I see a cardiologist every 3 months, and I have a therapist I started seeing in September who has a framed print in her office that says no is a complete sentence. And I have to work hard not to find it annoying, because I know it's true. I work fewer hours now. I said no to a double shift last month, and the world did not end. I sat on my couch on a Tuesday evening with nothing to do and nobody asking anything of me, and I watched a show I'd been meaning to watch for 2 years, and I fell asleep on the couch before it was over. And when I woke up, it was midnight and the apartment was quiet. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I was 23 and handing my first check to my mother with both hands. So glad to be able to help. So sure that giving was the same thing as being loved. But it was mine. For the first time in a long time, it was actually mine. I keep thinking about the chair, not the hospital bed, not the discharge paperwork, not even the visitor log, just the chair outside my room that Harlan sat in for 6 nights without once being invited, 45 minutes each time. A man I had never met, who drove 11 hours because he saw a report and couldn't not come. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't leave a note. He just showed up and sat in a chair in a hallway, and then went back to his motel, and came again the next evening. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. I used to think that loving someone meant giving until there was nothing left to give. My mother taught me that, indirectly, the way parents teach things they don't intend to, by receiving without question, by treating my generosity as a baseline instead of a gift. I learned that the people who love you are the ones who need things from you. So I kept giving. $1,200 a month. The extra transfers. The double shifts I picked up so I'd have more to send. $60,000 over 4 years. And the price of that wasn't just money. It was my blood pressure, my sleep, eventually my body folding in on itself on a hospital floor at 7 in the morning. Here's what I figured out since then: cause and effect doesn't care about your intentions. I gave because I loved them. That's real. But the effect of giving without limits wasn't love. It was a system. I became the foundation everyone stood on. And foundations don't get asked how they're doing. The collapse was always coming. I just didn't see it because I was too busy holding everyone else up to look down. What changed me wasn't the anger, although there was anger. It was the clarity that came after, lying in a hospital bed with my blood pressure through the roof, watching my phone for a message that took 3 days to arrive. That kind of quiet has a way of cutting through everything you've been telling yourself. I had been so focused on being needed that I never stopped to ask whether I was actually seen. There is a difference. I know that now, in a way, I couldn't have articulated at 23. Harlan sitting in that chair is the image I come back to when things get hard, because he didn't have to be there. He had no claim, no leverage, no history with me. He came because he thought it was right, and then he left without making it about himself. That's what it actually looks like, the thing I kept trying to buy with wire transfers and overtime shifts. It doesn't cost money, it costs character. I'm still learning to say no without my voice shaking. I'm still working through what I owe my father, the man who raised me, versus what I owe myself. I'm still figuring out who Harlan is to me and what to call what we're building. None of it is clean or resolved. But I go to my therapy appointments, I take my medication, I leave work on time most days now, and I sit with the discomfort of having needs instead of burying them under someone else's. That last part is the hardest. Meeting things. Believing you're allowed to. But I'm starting to think it's also the most important work a person can do. Not for anyone else, just for the life you're supposed to actually be living.